Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for tuning into AADL TV for yet another one of our book discussion programs. My name is Amanda.
And I'm Lucy.
And today we are here discussing 100 years of the Newbery Award. We are very excited. We both work with kids and we both read a lot of youth fiction books. So we're very excited to talk about this today. So what exactly is the Newbery Award and what kind of books receive it? Well, the Newbery Award is awarded annually by the Association for Library Service to Children, a division of the American Library Association, to the author of the most distinguished contribution to American literature for children the previous year. So this began in 1922, and here we are in 2022. So we are celebrating 100 years of the award. So each year a winner title is chosen, as well as usually between 2 and 5 honor titles. And they're usually really amazing books, and there are 100 years of them. So there are a lot of books to discuss. So Lucy and I kind of picked a few here and there, and we put together a little things we want to talk about today. So we are excited you are here with us to discuss Newbery Awards. Lucy, to start us off with, can you share a few that you would recommend or you've read and enjoyed?
Sure, I will. And first, I just want to say, like, one thing you were saying about the award itself, though, that I wanted to speak to quickly is the fact that it awards the most distinguished books, which is not like the most popular, which is one of the things that I really like about it, because sometimes it will draw attention to a book that hadn't been really in the mainstream or noticed a lot. So I just wanted to point out that important word in the award description. So I just reread From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frank-Weller, and this won the Newbery Award in 1968, and E.L. Konigsberg actually won an honor award that year too.
Oh,
She's
wow.
the only person to ever have done that, and they were her first 2 books. She was she's at home with her kids. She's a stay-at-home mom in New York City. And this first book was inspired by her children's complaints when she took them on a picnic. They were just like, there aren't enough amenities on this picnic, and they would never run away to anywhere less exciting than the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So she wrote this book about Claudia Kincaid and her younger brother, Jamie, who run away to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And they stay there, and it's just so like magical in the descriptions of them staying in the museum overnight, but also she writes these characters that were like really capable, knowledgeable kids. She wasn't writing down to kids. Claudia Kincaid as a main character is so self-assured. She's very funny, and she and her brother are both smart in different ways. And part of the reason Claudia is running away is that she feels like she has 3 brothers at home, and she gets the unfair amount of work put upon her, like, because she's the girl, she has to do more things. So I love that about it, 1968. And that book also reminds me in feel a little bit of Rebecca Steed's, or Rebecca Stead, When You Reach Me, which won in 2010 the Newbery Award. And it is a book about a girl in 1979 in New York City named Miranda. And Miranda's favorite book is A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. And so that book sort of pays homage to A Wrinkle in Time, but then at the same time, it becomes its own mystery. Miranda gets these notes from somebody maybe in the future. So it's sort of about solving a puzzle, but it's also about storytelling, which is something we might talk about later when we talk about this year's winner. And then just 2 other really standout books to me. One is Good Masters, Sweet Ladies, Voices from a Medieval Village. And this one in 2008. And the reason why I think this is so interesting is it's actually a play, sort of. I've never read a book like it. This teacher wanted to create something for her kids in her class. They were studying the Middle Ages, and she wanted them to have something that they could perform. So she wrote this book that's 19 monologues and 2 dialogues of all these people living in a medieval village. And it's really detailed. It's gruesome because I don't think any of us would have wanted to live in a medieval village. It's funny. She kind of just takes the gloss off what was going on and lets the kids explore some real history. But there are also these flashes of warmth and community within this village. So I loved it. It's a really different, really amazing book. And the last book I wanted to mention is El Deafo by C.C. Bell, which actually won the Newbery honor, or won an honor in 2015. And this is a graphic novel, which is one of my favorite genres of books. And it's really a loose autobiographical account, I would say, of C.C. Bell's childhood and life with deafness. She created this character that is a rabbit. And she says it's because rabbits have like really big ears. And she just thought they're known for that and their excellent hearing. And so the character in El Deafo is struggling with being different from the people in the world around her because she's deaf. And she gets this, she has like an aid with a tiny microphone, like a backpack that helps her hear. And she imagines that this is sort of her superpower. And so she calls herself El Deafo. And it's just a really great, funny, heartwarming book that I love, love, love. I could talk about a lot of other books, but Amanda, I'm gonna pass it over to you because that was a lot of words.
It was, but I could also continue talking for just as long about the books you mentioned. I read 3 out of the 4 of those, all great. I did not read Good Master Sweet Babies, so I was happy to hear good reviews of that one from you. I picked a couple of the ones that I've read that I really enjoyed. One of my top ones of all time, like kids books, is Holes by Louis Sachar. It won the winning award in 1999. And my introduction to the Holes was, I was a long-term substitute teacher for a fourth, fifth multi-age classroom. And we were broken up, the kids were broken up into reading groups. And the reading groups that were reading Holes were so engaged and excited and active. And I got super into the book and the characters with them. Some people know it now. It was eventually made into a very popular movie that's also actually really good as a movie adaptation. But the book is really, or the book is so funny and it's so well written. But we've got a character named Stanley Yelnats, which is Yelnats is Stanley backwards. So Stanley Yelnats, he is under a curse that began with his no good, dirty, rotten, pig stealing great-great-grandfather. And the curse has since followed generations of Yelnats. So Stanley is sent to a boys detention center, Camp Green Lake, where all of the boys in the camp are building character by digging holes all day. They are digging holes and digging holes. And eventually Stanley figures out that they are digging holes for a reason. The warden is up to something and they are digging holes looking for something specific. So you've got Stanley and a bunch of other young boys, and just like being like young kids, it is funny. There's heart, there's warmth, and the way the story is written, little surprises kind of pop in. It's one of my favorite youth novels of all time. So highly recommend Holes if you or a child in your life has not read it yet. Also read it and then watch the movie if you haven't yet. But I do recommend both because the movie is just as entertaining and there's some really great actors in it. Another favorite is kind of an oddball. I feel like not enough people talk about this book, and that is The Wednesday Wars by Gary Schmidt. Gary Schmidt is one of my favorite youth authors. He writes a lot of just realistic fiction. A lot of them are historical, and I love the way he writes. He's such a good writer, and he's so good at encapsulating the emotions and feelings of the young kids that he's talking about. So The Wednesday Wars, it won in 2008. It won an honor in 2008. And I probably read it shortly after, but it's set in 1967, 1968. So the backdrop, the Vietnam War is happening. But we meet Holling Hood. And Holling Hood is a 7th grader, and he must spend every Wednesday with his teacher, Mrs. Baker, while the other students are at religious instruction. He has to sit with her, and they are studying William Shakespeare. And he insists that his teacher must hate him so much in order to make him sit every single Wednesday and work on the works of William Shakespeare. So there's this sort of beloved student-teacher relationship where the teacher ends up being an influence on the kid. And I'm a sucker for those kinds of movies and books. And Gary Schmidt has those in his books. There's always sort of a kid in need and then an adult who's there that's able to like help them thrive and survive and move above and beyond whatever the difficult situation they are in. So that is The Wednesday Wars by Gary Schmidt. Another one is The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. Yes, Neil Gaiman. This is a children's book by him, and it won the award in 2009, and it features a young boy named Nobody. They call him Bod. He is Nobody Owens, or Bod. And he is just your average typical kid, except for he lives in a graveyard and he's being raised and educated by ghosts with a solitary guardian who belongs to neither the world of the living nor the world of the dead. So it's definitely darker and more mysterious. And it's interesting seeing what kids or adults like this book and don't like this book, but it's Neil Gaiman, so it's creepy and weird and bizarre, but it's another one that's super well written. And I love seeing the character Bod just as he goes through the adventures of being in this graveyard each day and what comes in and out of his life. So that is The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. The last one I want to mention is one I super loved. I can say that for all of these, is The One and Only Ivan by Catherine Applegate. And that was the winner in 2013. And this one's cool because it is told from the point of view of a gorilla. Ivan is our gorilla, and he's the one who is narrating the story, and he is in captivity. He's at the Exit 8 Big Top Mall and Video Arcade, so he is there. And so he's been captive there, so he's used to watching humans and how they interact and things that they do. He doesn't really think of or miss the jungle too much. But then a young baby elephant comes into his life named Ruby. And when Ruby arrives, changes come along with her, and Ivan learns a lot of things. And it's really interesting watching the point of view of this gorilla talking about like animal welfare and watching how he interacts with the humans. And it's a really good book for like teaching purposes. It has heart, it has compassion, it has friendship between humans and animals, like animal, and humans and animals. So it's really interesting. And it's one of those stories that just like eats you up. You're like, oh, this gorilla. So that is The One and Only Ivan by Catherine Applegate. And there was a follow-up, The One and Only Bob. And I think Bob is the dog. I don't remember. Do you remember what is it? Did you read that one?
No, I didn't read the.
Maybe that Bob was the dog, but there's another one called The One and Only Bob. And they were adapting The One and Only Ivan into a movie. I think it was on Disney. I don't know if it came out or not. I don't really know if I want to watch it, but I loved the book. All right, so Lucy mentioned a few books. I mentioned a few books. We are very excited to be talking about books we love. So what else is there to chat about Newbery Awards?
Well, I think it was interesting that when I brought up El Defo, that like a graphic novel would win a Newbery Award. I think that sometimes they're overlooked, and less and less so these days. They're becoming more popular, but there were a couple of other ones that are definitely worth mentioning. Roller Girl by Victoria Jameson, which I loved, got an honor in 2016, and that's the story of a girl who signs up for roller derby camp because her best friend does, and she does everything her best, or she thinks she's her best friend. She's kind of, I don't know. Anyway, her best friend does ballet camp, and so this girl ends up in roller derby camp without her best friend and without being able to roller skate or anything. And what she learns and what she gains from that experience is funny. It's also just it's like a great little slice of life coming of age in this one little moment in time in her camp. And then in 2020, a graphic novel actually won the award. That was New Kid by Jerry Craft. And that also won the Coretta Scott King Award that same year, and numerous other awards. But it is a story of a kid who he wants to draw. This is what he really wants to do. And his parents instead sent him to this elite private school where he has to go from his neighborhood, which is a mostly Black neighborhood, to this totally different neighborhood. And he is one of very few Black kids in this school. And it's sort of about his experience in that school. So those are just some different ones just because they're graphic novels. And I love that those are being recognized by this award as well. And there are some other different genres that aren't just sort of chapter books. Amanda, I think you had a few of those you were going to mention.
Yeah. And I remember when books that were not the typical fiction youth books started winning, like when the first graphic novel or the first picture book or the first graphic novel, like I was one of those people. So these awards are announced every January at ALA. There's like a special day, and all of these librarians across the country get very excited and sit there and wait and wait and wait to see what's going to be announced. So the Newberry's, I guess, one of the big three, the Newbery, and then the Caldecott for illustration picture book, and then the Prince for the teen book award.
Mhm.
But when these other formats started winning the Newbery, it was like, oh, did you see it? Oh my goodness, and what did they? But now it's like, this is the several years later, and it's just expected and accepted. You embrace that, hey, I love that this award that's been going on for 100 years is embracing these other formats of just as amazing, like books for kids that can be just as distinguished as some of the, other books that we're going to
Mhm.
talk about. So it's interesting. So you mentioned some graphic novels, picture books. We've got some really great picture books. I won't talk about each one and what they are about, but Undefeated is amazing. It has gorgeous illustrations. Highly recommend Undefeated. There's a book called Last Stop on Market Street. Highly recommend. Crown, Ode to the Fresh Cut. Beautiful picture book in story and in pictures. And then there's a stack of nonfiction books that have won. There's a book called Claudette Colvin. There's a book called Bomb, The Race to Build and Steal, The World's Most Dangerous Weapon, and then Breaking Stalin's Nose. So those are more nonfiction. And I just think it's amazing that you can have like books like Roller Girl and Breaking Stalin's Nose winning the Newbery against some of these other titles that have won over the years.
Yeah, I agree. And I like seeing that sort of diverse range of genres. And then some of these books are also, many of these books, because they are distinguished stories, are really great to listen to as well as to read.
Mhm.
And I know that there's a book that we both listened to that we loved, which is, well, you can tell us what it is.
Oh, the book is called Bud Not Buddy. And what year was Bud Not Buddy published? In the 90s, right? I didn't write it down.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Bud Not Buddy. What year did Bud Not Buddy win? Well, it was published in 1999. So probably
Yeah.
in 99-ish. No, because
I think it probably won for in the year 2000 then, right? Doesn't it win?
That makes sense.
Well,
Yeah, that makes sense.
around then.
So Bud Not Buddy is a book by Christopher Paul Curtis, author from Michigan, and it is amazing. This book is not a new book, and as a person who reads a lot of kids' books, it's always been on my list, but I push it down when new things come on. I keep pushing it down and pushing it down, and I didn't read it. And then it ended up on one of the Black Lives Matter reading lists through AADL, and I was like, oh, cool, great time to like sit and read this book. And instantly when I read it, I had so many regrets that I did not read it sooner. I felt so robbed of more time knowing in my heart and soul that this young man named Bud Not Buddy was out there in the world and doing his thing through this book. So the book is about a young kid named Bud Not Buddy, and it is set in Flint, Michigan in 1936, and he is now motherless, and his father is long gone and unknown, and he's on a mission, a daring mission to travel. He has a couple clues packed in his suitcase, and he's on a mission through like the Depression era, through state lines to find his father. And he is so self-assured and so hilarious, and he is such a great character to follow. So Bud narrates the story, and he is the most lovable, and he just has so much like wit and charisma, and he meets several adults along the way who end up kind of helping him along the way. But he's just a lovable character. So I read the book, and then maybe a year later, I think we were discussing this for something else, and I listened to it on audio. Holy moly. The audio is phenomenal. I listened to the audiobook twice, and the narrator is amazing. And it's an actor, and I forget his name, but he has a wonderful voice, and he speaks Buddy so well, and just narrates his funny little quips and things he says. And it's such an amazing audiobook. Lucy, what was your experience with Bud?
Yeah, I read it, and like you, I was just like, why did I not read this the minute it got on my list? I love this book. I love Bud. And there's just like so much in it. Besides him being this great, funny character, it's also because of the time and place that it's in. You know, he is this Black kid who ends up in spaces where people are like, you really shouldn't be here after dark. And then there's like these historical things that aren't, they're just put in there, and they're definitely important to talk about when you're discussing this book, but they're just part of his journey. And then, like you, I also listened to it. And the minute the audiobook ended, I was just like, okay, go back to the beginning, because I could not stand to be done with that and not have that voice narrating, but in my life. And I agree, like you, like he just added all those little expressions that Bud has that are so funny. And there was just so much. I mean, either, I don't think you can go wrong reading it or listening to it. I kind of recommend that you do both multiple times, but that's just I can't say enough about that book. I just loved it. And in fact, talking about it right now, you and I were saying this earlier, I just actually would like to go read it.
Yeah, I checked out the book from the library to bring home just to like have in my hand, and I was like, oh, I wish I would read it again. Maybe I'll listen to it later. But I'm newer to loving audiobooks over the past 2 years. I've really grown to love them and realize, hey, I can read more books if I listen to some of them. So as somebody who's newer to audiobooks, and even now I'll recommend audio, and people are like, oh, I don't read audiobooks. And I'm like, so if you're skeptical, it's available in Overdrive. I think we've got the CD at the library. It's still a good one. And what is it, 4 to 6 hours? It's not very long.
It's not long.
The narrator is amazing. Bud Caldwell, I mean, he's one to read about his journey. And then there is a follow-up that's loosely related. There's a character that appears in Bud Not Buddy that shows up in it. And she has a standalone book that's about her called The Mighty Miss Malone. And it's a similar in tone. And it's not a Newbery Award. I should stop talking about it. But it was also,
that's okay.
It's a follow-up that was also, I really loved how the character was written from the little girl's point of view. So that's Bud Not Buddy, and that's going way back to 99, 2000. So 100 years of books is a lot of books. So this year, the awards were announced in January, as I've said. And Lucy, what in the world won the Newbery Award this year? Not an honor. What was the big grand winner of 2022?
The book this year that won was called THELASTCUENTISTA, and it is by Donna Barbara Higuera, who is also the author of Lupe Wong Won't Dance or Can't Dance. I don't know. But I think it's a wonderful book, and it's sci-fi, I would say, but it also has a lot of other things in it. It takes place in the distant future, and Earth is going to be destroyed by a comet. So people are leaving Earth, and not everybody can leave. A lot of people have been selected to get on these spaceships and leave Earth. And the main character, Petra, and her family are chosen to leave. And they are all going to travel like 300 years into space. So they will lose space, and they will also lose time. And they'll wake up in a totally different world, literally, in many different ways. Petra wakes up to find out that things have gone horribly wrong. And what was supposed to happen to the community of people who left on these spaceships is not what happened at all. And some other people took over while they were all taking their 300-year nap. There was a glitch in whatever room or space that Petra was in, though, so she doesn't sort of fall under the same spell as everyone else. And she can remember Earth, and she can remember her family in a way that nobody else can. Before she left Earth, she was really close with her grandmother. Her grandmother was a cuentista, a storyteller, and she gave to Petra all these stories to take with her. And she's like, these are important, these are who you are. So this is something that Petra still has when she wakes up, and she uses her ability to tell stories and uses the stories that she knows to help other people remember who they are and remember their families before they left and remember their lives on Earth and realize that the situation around them is not the situation that they were told it was going to be. And some of the things that I loved about it were the storytelling aspect, the focus on the idea of storytelling as something that's passed down, but also that becomes your own thing. And her grandmother even says to her before she leaves, she says, what if, she says to her grandmother, like, what if I ruin these stories when I'm trying to tell them? to other people.
Mhm.
Her grandmother says, "You can't ruin them. They've traveled hundreds of years and through many people to find you. Now go make them your own." And this is something Petra has to do because the stories that she knows are not going to make sense to the people that she's telling them to. So
Mhm.
she has to change them and make them of the moment in a way that they will spark something in her listeners. And and they certainly do. And it's so it becomes a story about escaping through stories, but also escaping in other ways and using the knowledge that came before you and using stories to learn who you are and to connect people. And the author said part of the reason she wrote it is she wanted to write something for kids who feel like they want to escape this past
Mhm.
time that we've all been through has been difficult for kids, and she wanted to give them something that felt like an escape in many different ways. And she also wanted to impart this idea of following your heart and being true to what you feel is inside you. And she said she knew that this story was intense, but she also doesn't want to underestimate her readers ever.
Mhm.
And so she felt that they could handle the things on those pages. And I think that is definitely a hallmark of a great book for kids. It's just not acting like you're writing it for kids, but you know. So that's sort of my synopsis of that book that I really enjoyed. Amanda, what did you think?
So this book, I actually just finished reading this book yesterday, and about 30 pages in, I texted Lucy and I was like, "Lucy, it's a lot of sci-fi. I don't know if I'm getting into this." And Lucy said, "Keep going. Imagine it's about storytelling, but it's set in space." Like, I'm not the biggest reader of sci-fi. I do better with sci-fi movies, but I just, when they started talking about space and the future and different tonics and things they were doing, I get lost, and I feel like I'm in Star Trek world, and that's not my thing. But one of the things I discovered over the past couple of years is reading outside of my comfort zone, outside of my box. So I'm reading this beautifully written book. And what kept me rooted on Earth and not in space and in this book was the storytelling that was included, and that there were Spanish moments in here, her relationship with her grandmother. And I love that she did change those stories. She became a storyteller. She is the last cuentista. And there are other people that she ends up communicating with on the ship, and she's able to share those stories and keep those stories alive. So, which I think is an amazing thing about storytelling. So for me, it ended up being, once I focused on the storytelling bit, I got more into it. And it is heartfelt. It really makes you think about like what you have in your home. And if something were to happen, like, if there was like a comet coming to Earth, and how would you react? And if you were on one of the last 3 ships to leave space, what do you take with you? And how do you, once you're going into like these little pods to sleep for however long, like how do you say goodbye to your family? And then when you wake up, it's like, wait a minute, what's happened? So it's very well written. I really love, so the book, it's interwoven. She interweaves these memories of her with her family and her life on Earth, which I think also rooted me in reading the story. It wasn't all set in space and in the future. She did have those moments of telling stories about like her conversations with her grandmother, or special things she would do with her mom and her dad and her little brother. So those memories were peppered in throughout the book, which I think gave it so much more heart to knowing what she was trying to hold on to and remember and didn't want to let go, and then was able to keep alive through stories within her heart, and then also by telling some of the stories that her grandmother told her. So it's a really great book. It has a beautiful cover. Yeah, and this year it won. I think it was a great contender to win the Newbery Award for sure. I think it
Mhm.
had a lot of the elements
Yeah.
make it purely distinguished. So great choice.
Yeah, and also I love actually, and I didn't say this, that it's this Latina character in a sci-fi book, and that is not that's sort of unusual, and so I really liked seeing that as well. Um, but yeah, I thought it was really really beautifully written. And,
Yeah, it's a great book. So thank you,
mhm.
Lucy, and thank you to this little program we cooked up to make me read something I probably wouldn't have read, because with so many years of Newberries, it's hard to read the winners. It's hard to read the honors, but it's always exciting when the winners are announced each year. Like, I know sometimes it's hard to put credit into like, oh, won an award, blah, 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 whether it's a movie or a book. But I think with the kids' books, like the list of Newberries, they're all really, really great books. And the
Mhm.
books, when they're published, they do give a lot of boost to like authors and their careers and what comes next. And they're great books. And it's, if you're looking for, hey, I don't know what books to read, like if you're looking for yourself as an adult reader or a teen reader or a child reader, like
Mhm.
go pull up a list of like Newbery winners, honors, and grab a few here and there. And they're all great books for different reasons, but they're all, you know what I mean? A group of librarians came together to decide like, hey, this is a book that I loved reading and that I love putting in the hands of children at my work, at my job. So that's to me what's special about the Newbery. So that's sort of
Yeah,
how we want to come together and talk a little bit about it today.
yeah, and well, just to one more thing to add on there is I
Yeah.
think like if you were looking at that list and you wanted to find something to read, I think what you and I have both sort of talked about today is like you could go back pretty far. I mean, I
Mhm,
talked about a book from 1968, and if you're still going to find something
mhm,
that is really readable
mhm.
and really enjoyable. So
Yeah, and there's
it's a good
fiction,
list.
nonfiction, sci-fi, there's fantasy, and now we've got comic books, graphic novels, there are picture books, there's nonfiction.
Hmm.
So there's a little bit of something for everybody mixed in there. So Lucy, any other final thoughts on the Newbery? No? All right. Well,
Um,
if you're looking for a book, the Newbery Award's been around since 1922. So we've got 100 years of books, winners, and honors. And if you search for it online, you will come up with some really great lists. I know the ALA has a really great list that lists all of the winners and the honors. So we were so excited to come together today to talk about books. We love talking about books and especially kids' books. So thank you so much for joining us today and happy reading.